Welcome to the Calm Mom Podcast, the show for ambitious women ready to get off the hot mess express. I know you've got a lot going on. You work so hard, you're raising an incredible family, and sometimes it can be overwhelming. I'm your host, Michelle Grosser. I'm a certified master life coach, attorney, wife, and mom. And years ago, I was right where you are. I was running a busy law practice while raising a family, and I was on the fast track to burnout. I thought I just needed to be more organized or have better routines, but it was learning how to heal and regulate my nervous system that expanded my capacity to gracefully hold more of this big, beautiful life. You too are worthy of an extraordinary life in and beyond motherhood. Learning to be a calm, anchoring presence in your home and at work is going to be your superpower. If you're here to do the inner work that brings a sense of calm amidst the chaos, I'm here to join you on that journey. Each time you press play, your growth continues. So let's get at it. Hey, you're listening to the Calm Mom Podcast. Michelle Grosser here. We're going to talk about burnout today, but I'm so excited because I'm finally recording in my new office in Houston. We have made the trek. We're starting to get settled in. Our house, we're renting a house in the city. It's a new construction, and we signed the lease and then realized that the permits weren't yet closed out. So we're not moved in yet, but they were so kind and gracious as to let us kind of move our stuff in so I can record here today. So I'm so excited because for the last few weeks, I have been recording and coming at you from spare bedrooms all across America in Airbnbs. So it feels good to be finally at my desk with my monitor, with my microphone and all the things. So it's been a lot. We left Miami, I think like 3.5 weeks ago now. We took a week to make a road trip to Houston, and then we've been staying in hotels and Airbnbs and out of boxes and suitcases. And I've been with my kids every waking moment for the last 5 weeks, and finally put them to bed early actually one night a few days ago, and I decided to take a bath because the Airbnb we're staying in has this glorious, huge, beautiful bathtub, and that's one of my favorite things. And then I was just thinking about everything that I had to prepare for the launch of the fall cohort of Restore, which, if you're new here, is our quarterly small group coaching program. And I'm sitting there in the bathtub, and I just heard God so clearly, so gently in my spirit be like, you don't have to do this in September. And immediately it just felt like this huge weight was lifted from my shoulders because it's true. So I say all of that to say there is going to be no fall cohort of Restore this year because it's really important to me that I am in integrity and that I am embodying what I'm teaching here on the show every week. And there are some ways that I want to tweak the program and make it more robust. And there are experts that I want to bring in. So for those of you who are planning on doing Restore in September, first of all, thank you so much. I'm so excited for you. And hang tight, mark your calendars for January. We're going to start again in the new year. When we all need to regulate, I think, after the holidays. So I'm believing that this will encourage some of you to also take a look at what you actually really need to be doing in this season, because oftentimes the last quarter of the year can really contribute to a lot of burnout if we're not careful, right? And again, I just want to make sure I'm in integrity, that I'm doing the things that I'm teaching, practicing what I preach, right? I really value your trust in that. I want you guys to be listening and be like, that chick's the real deal. So instead of continuing to push and, burn the midnight oil and stress myself out this week to try to get everything ready for a good quality launch of Restore while I'm living out of a suitcase, I took the pressure off and I decided that we're going to pause for now and we're going to come back in so much strength at the beginning of the year. So thank you for that. All right, today we're going to talk about burnout. We're going to talk about some personality traits that I think contribute to burnout. And when I call them traits, I don't want you guys to see or hear or think that these are traits, like quote unquote traits that are part of your personality, that these are things that are just like, again, in quotes, just how you are, right? These are all actually protective coping mechanisms. These are defense strategies that you developed brilliantly over the course of your life, probably starting in childhood, in response to things that happened in your life that felt like a lot of pressure or felt unsafe, or ways that you received a lot of love and affirmation as a kid. So it kind of became this pattern that was reinforced by your caregivers, and your nervous system was like, oh, this is good. Let's do more of this, right? So when I say traits, these are not like fixed parts of you that you just have to be resigned to. These are all patterns that you've developed over time that can absolutely be healed and shifted. All right, so here's the trifecta. A lot of us have maybe one or two or all of these because they all ultimately stem from the same place. They all ultimately stem from the same fears, from the same thing going on in our nervous system. But be encouraged, my friends, because you really can learn how to heal these patterns. Ask me how I know. Okay. All right, let's jump in. The first one, the first personality trait that is probably draining your energy is people pleasing. Surprise, surprise, right? So with each of these, what I want to go through is how they kind of show up in our day-to-day life, and then talk about it kind of from a nervous system perspective, what's going on in our brain, why do we do this, how it impacts burnout. And then I want to give you a few really practical takeaways to kind of start to heal this trait or this personality pattern, if you will. Okay, so for people pleasing, how does it typically manifest? Well, I mean, it's kind of, I think some of it's kind of obvious, and I think in other ways it's a little more subtle. But oftentimes it manifests in overcommitting to other people's requests, right? And it's not just like having a servant's heart or being, kind and helpful. It's overcommitting to others' requests at the expense of our own needs, right? Like basic personal needs. A lot of times people pleasing shows up in avoiding confrontation. Sometimes it shows up struggling to set boundaries. Sometimes it even shows up like feeling like you're constantly seeking validation or approval from others. You're wondering what everyone's going to think. You're doing things, and then if no one notices or you don't get the validation you thought you were going to get, no one thanks you, right? Then it feels like, man, why did I even do this? And then oftentimes people pleasing shows up in just feeling responsible for everyone else, right? Making sure everyone else is happy, making sure everyone else is good, making sure their emotions are in a comfortable place for everyone. And that's a big weight to carry, especially as parents, and if we're married, as spouses, to people, especially little people, but people whose, happiness and emotions can just ride the whole roller coaster. And it's hard to be responsible for making sure that people feel a certain way. So from a nervous system perspective, people pleasing, it often develops as a survival strategy, like all of these, rooted in our nervous system's need for social connection and safety. So at some point from probably a pretty early age, we learn that approval and we learn that acceptance from other people, the people in our home at first, right? And then the people in our extended family, our community, that ensures our belonging, and that thus ensures our safety and our security, right? That comes from social groups. Our parasympathetic nervous system, when we say we are quote unquote regulated, right? That circuit of our nervous system that regulates social engagement and bonding, that becomes activated when we try to please others. That becomes activated when we try to, keep the peace and avoid conflict. That becomes activated when we try to keep everyone loving us and liking us and happy with us and avoiding rejection. And why do we do it? Well, it's a defense mechanism, right? We want to avoid the discomfort of letting people down, disapproval. Ultimately like potential abandonment. So by prioritizing everyone's needs around us over our own, again, back to that like self-abandoning behavior, we attempt to create a sense of safety and honestly, in the sense of maintaining harmony with everyone around us. How does it impact burnout? Well, you can just imagine, right? Overcommitment, first of all, but just constantly prioritizing everyone else, putting everyone else's needs ahead of ours, having unrealistic expectations, of what we can do for others and when we should do it and how we should do it, that drains our resources, you guys. That will lead to physical exhaustion. That will lead to emotional, mental exhaustion. Usually when we're people pleasers, we have pretty poor boundaries. So that can mean we take on more work than we should. That can mean that our calendar is more packed than it really needs to be. And we just don't have enough time for the things that our body needs, right? That our soul needs, that true self-care. And it pushes our nervous system into a state of chronic stress. So what do we do about it? Well, if you tend to have a pattern of people pleasing, which I think a lot of us do to a certain extent. I certainly did, and I think I still do, right? I still catch myself in that pattern, is just recognizing it. Self-awareness is always the first step, right? You guys have heard me say it till I'm blue in the face. Awareness precedes choice. We cannot intervene in a world that we cannot see. So just recognizing when you're in that pattern of people pleasing and catching it sooner and sooner is going to allow you to do something about it, right? And I think catching when you're in the pattern is super helpful, but there's even a step before that. And I think when you start to grow an awareness of your triggers of people-pleasing behavior, then you can kind of get in front of it, right? You can get out in front of it. And then just reflecting, like when in the past did you notice that people-pleasing, that urge to keep everyone happy and say yes to all the things coming up and contributing to your behavior? Boundaries are a huge part with people-pleasing. So practice setting boundaries, practice maintaining healthy boundaries. Like start with something super small, something manageable, right? That you can start practicing saying no to or declining or saying you don't have the bandwidth for at the time. And that can do so much good in helping you expand your capacity to say no. And then finally, if you've been struggling with people pleasing for a while, if it's something you've tried to work on, if it's something you know you want to work on, work with a coach or work with a therapist, right? I know a coach who would love to work with you on this, but really find a good coach who understands the nervous system. Find a therapist who understands the nervous system, trauma, somatics, to really help you kind of explore the root causes and develop some healthier coping strategies. So that's number one, people pleasing. Number two, the second personality trait that is probably contributing to your drained energy is perfectionism. And how does this show up in our day-to-day life? A lot of times when we have perfectionistic tendencies, we tend to set super high, super unrealistic standards and expectations, not only for ourselves, but also for others, you guys. Like, do you have super high expectations for your partner or your, people you work with or your children? A lot of times that comes from our own crap with perfectionism. Procrastination. I was in a one-on-one call with a coaching client of mine earlier this week, and she was telling me, she's like, I tell people that I'm like what did she say? Something to the effect of like, I'm a wannabe perfectionist because I actually end up just procrastinating all the time. And I'm like, oh, my friend, those two are just tied hand in hand. Perfectionism so often comes with procrastination because for fear of it not meeting expectations, for fear of it not being perfect, like that's a heavy load to bear, right? For something to be perfect. So instead of actually trying to carry that out, so often it just seems like too much. So it'll kind of throw us into a freeze response, which feels like procrastination. Excessive attention to detail, difficulty delegating tasks. Maybe you have a really loud inner critic, right? Maybe your self-talk is really harsh. Maybe you don't have a healthy relationship with making mistakes or, perceived failure. All of those can be manifestations of perfectionism. And from a nervous system perspective, you guys, perfectionism comes from a need for control. It comes from a need for predictability. And that's rooted in our nervous system's wiring response to uncertainty and potential threats, right? It's a safety mechanism. Our sympathetic nervous system, our fight or flight response, is activated when we perceive that things aren't perfect, right? Or if we have a fear of failure, and that will drive that need for perfectionism. But if we're living our life every day trying to avoid criticism, rejection, perceived threats to our worthiness, right? Our sense of self-worth, all because that feels unsafe. That's exhausting, you guys. Like, you can see how this leads to burnout, right? Because when we're in these patterns of perfectionistic tendencies, we're chasing this goal, we're chasing this ideal ultimately that doesn't actually exist. And that relentless pursuit of perfection, that leads to chronic stress. Our nervous system is just like constantly in this heightened state of alertness and striving and proving, right? We're hypervigilant. We have this inability to relax. We have this inability to accept the messy, the imperfections of life. And that will exhaust us mentally and physically and emotionally and spiritually and contribute to burnout. So what do? How do we start to heal a pattern of perfectionism? You guys, we learn to find safety and be okay in the mess. That's it, right? This is just an untangling of perfect being tied to safe. Messy can be safe, right? Imperfect can be okay. You've heard the saying, right? Done is better than perfect. So much of life is messy. Our parenting is messy. At least mine definitely is, right? Personal growth is messy. Running a business is messy. It's not always perfect. Relationships, right? My marriage, like they're not these perfect, predictable little entities. They're messy. They often don't go as I want them to, as much as that sucks to admit, right? So start small, you guys. Like, what's something you could prove to your nervous system is okay and safe to be messy today? And start to just kind of flex that muscle. And I promise you, if you have kids, there's like a bajillion opportunities today to be messy with them and prove to yourself that you didn't die, right? Thriving in the mess is a superpower, friends. I'm telling you about it. And I'm not just talking about like a messy home. I'm talking about being okay with reality, because reality is not perfect. Reality does not comply or care about your expectations. That's just the truth. So that's the second one. And then the third one, the third personality trait I want to talk about today that might be draining your energy is high functioning anxiety. How does that show up? Well, it shows up in a lot of sneaky ways. High functioning anxiety can show up in chronic constant busyness. So if you are someone who really struggles to slow down, you're always busy, always like kind of fidgeting around, always doing something, you're a busybody, right? You have difficulty relaxing. That's probably a sign of high functioning anxiety. Overachieving, right? I'm like raising my hand over here, taking on excessive responsibilities, perfectionism, like we just talked about, fear of failure, even physical symptoms. You guys, I don't know what time you guys are listening to this today, but at noon today on September 10th, if you're listening live, noon Eastern, we're doing a de-stress protocol on Zoom. I'll put the link in the show notes. If you're listening to it before noon, you can sign up and join us. But I'm going to be guiding you guys through a live somatic release to help release some of this stress from our body. And with high functioning anxiety, a lot of times stress does show up in physical symptoms, muscle tension, fatigue, issues sleeping, gut issues, all of these different things. With high functioning anxiety, it's really driven by our sympathetic nervous system. That's that fight or flight response being continually activated. We're kind of stuck in this state. And that heightened state of alertness, right? It comes from so many different things, but it could be that that's just kind of like our environment where we were raised. Maybe it was chaotic, and I don't even mean chaotic like in an overtly bad way, but maybe there was just like a lot going on all the time, right? Like I'm the oldest of 5 kids. My parents had 5 kids in 8 years. Imagine having 5 kids under the age of 8. Like there was a lot going on, right? High functioning anxiety can stem from trauma, big T or little t trauma, conditioning our nervous system ultimately to just stay on alert, right? Remain vigilant and then be productive in order to manage our anxiety. So we stay busy, right? So we don't have to deal with it and deal with life. We don't have to face all that underlying stuff, our underlying fears and our underlying anxieties and worries and conversations we don't want to have and all of the things, right? So we stay busy. How does that impact burnout? Well, when we are constantly seeking productivity, when our nervous system is continuously activated, that leads to chronic stress on our body, and that leads to exhaustion. So when we experience high functioning anxiety and we have a hard time resting, we just don't have space to recuperate. Our body just doesn't have space to rest and digest and heal, right? And that can send us into emotional and physical burnout. So what do we do? I think a great place to start here is just starting to engage in mindfulness. And what do I mean by that? I mean slowing down. I mean noticing what's going on in your body, noticing your thoughts, right? Getting off autopilot, jumping off the hamster wheel of life, jumping off the hot mess express, and just slowing down. What would it look like to journal? What would it look like to just sit and meditate or breathe or think? What would it look like to have 10 minutes of just like prayer, calming your nervous system, and then really learning how to address the underlying anxiety, right? Developing some strategies to look at the root causes of your anxiety and then manage that anxiety without overworking ultimately. All right, so that's what I've got for you guys today. 3 personality traits that are draining your energy: people pleasing, perfectionism, and high functioning anxiety. If you guys have gotten anything out of this episode, if it has been helpful for you, if you've learned anything, if it resonated, if you're like, I feel so seen, any of those, I would be so grateful if you would leave the show a 5-star rating and a short review. I'm just so grateful for those of you who've already done so and those of you who are going to do so today. It just warms my heart and it really gets the show out in front of other women, which is ultimately what I'm trying to do here. Thank you guys so much. I love you so much. I'll talk to you soon.
If you love Mommy's Podcast, leave a review.
If you enjoyed this episode, it would be so awesome if you could take a moment to subscribe and rate the podcast. And if you have just a few more seconds to leave a quick review, they really help to get this podcast out to other moms like you. I read every last review, and trust me, when it's late at night or early in the morning before my kids get up and I'm working on bringing you all of this content, your reviews are what keep me going. Leaving a review is truly the best way you can thank me. And of course, DM me on Instagram. I love to hear from you. Thanks for listening to another episode. Head over to the show notes for this episode and all past episodes at michellegrosser.com, where you'll find free resources and more ways to connect with me. If you love the show, share it with a friend. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you next time.